This swagged knot stitch can be a really fun way to decorate your knitting. It has lots of texture and a really pretty look, and you can work just one row of it around an edging, or you can work it throughout the stitch pattern of the garment. You could also work it in different colours or with different colour bands of the main colour yarn throughout, and it looks especially nice in variegated yarn. I've used it here on my square block that's used in the Starlit Sky Shrug. It has plenty of stretch, and it's a slip stitch technique, which I really enjoy working. The stretchiness means it's really well adapted for garments. Let's have a look at how to work it. So having worked a few rows in the main colour, I'm doing 4 rows between each pair of slip stitch rows. I'm going to pick up the contrast colour, and I find it quite handy just to twist the main colour yarn around my little finger before starting work, just to keep that end stitch nice and tense. And then you're going to slip a number of stitches at the start. You could just slip one every time you want to work the row, but in order to maintain a nice even stretchiness, I've offset the rows alternately, so you can see these 2 rows here are in line, and this row is worked between them. So I'm going to do another row like this, and that means I'm going to slip 2 stitches instead of 1 stitch. You can see here I've slipped 2 stitches, and here I've only slipped 1 stitch at the start. So I'm going to slip the stitches, and I'm going to slip them as if I were working a purl stitch through them, so with my working needle to the front, and take that off. So that stitch remains unworked, and so does that stitch. Now I'm going to work the knot stitch, and to do this I'm going to pull a stitch through in the normal way as if working a knit stitch, but I'm not going to drop the loop off. Now I'm going to work a yarn over, and I'm going to hold that in place and work another knit stitch which will secure it, and then I'm going to slip my next stitch after slipping that stitch off. So let's do that again. Knit without dropping, yarn over and hold, knit, drop the stitch off, and slide under the next stitch purlwise to slip it off the needle. Let's do that again. Knit, yarn over, hold, knit, off, and slip. And you can work that all the way across the piece of work. And if you have an odd number of stitches, which is ideal for this stitch pattern, if you're working starting with 1 stitch, you'll have 1 stitch left at the end, and if you're working with 2 stitches, you'll have 2 stitches left at the end. Slip them both purlwise as you've slipped all the knit stitches so far, and there's your row of knot stitches made. Now we're going to turn the work over, and we're going to work the swags, this little bit under the stitches, and we're going to make the knots sit forward rather than sitting flat on the needle as they do now. Okay, so as we turn round, if you want the yarn to move to the opposite side of the work 1 stitch before you start working off the little triple stitches there. So if I had just 1 stitch at the end, like here, that I was going to slip, I would just put it around the outside of the work. But here I have 2 stitches, so I'm going to slip the first one, and then I'm going to start that first swag on the opposite side by moving the yarn to the right side of the work, so the back of the work from where I'm sitting. So I'm now going to slip that next stitch, so you can see the yarn is now at the front of the work, but this outside stitch isn't wrapped with the yarn. So now I'm going to knit these 3 stitches together, but I'm going to do it through the back loop. Normally we'd knit through this side and we'd put our needle through all 3 stitches like that. That's quite awkward to do. It's much easier, and it gets the right effect if you work through all 3 stitches through the back like this, and then just knit like that. Okay, so slip your next stitch, the stitch in the main colour, the one that you slipped on the previous row, needle through all 3 stitches through the back loop, and then we're going to lift that one through. Slip the next stitch, needle through all 3 stitches, make sure you get all 3, and pull the loop through. And you're going to keep working like that all the way across to the other end. You can see sometimes it's a little bit tricky if you've wound them slightly tight, and then in that case just wiggle this needle a little bit and they tend to come through much better. And slip again. So work in that way until the end of the row. So when you get to the end of the row, you'll have either 1 or 2 stitches at the end. It should be the same number as you had at the start if you've worked it over an odd number of stitches, which is best for this stitch. So if you have just 1 stitch, you're actually finished there. You can just leave the yarn because it will naturally wrap around the back when you start your next row. If you have 2 stitches there, you want to slip one with the yarn still on the right side of the work, the rear from where you're sitting, and then slip another one afterwards. And I'll show you the effect this creates. This is why we're doing that on those alternate rows. It just keeps that swag the same length. It goes around from one stitch, the next stitch to the knot stitch. And so that's our completed row of knot stitches. I would just offer a couple of little tips for when you're working this one. Make sure you have good lighting, otherwise it's really easy to drop some of the stitches when you're working those knit 3 togethers through the back loop. Another one in similar vein would be that if you need to wear any glasses to help with your sight, make sure you have those with you. You might find that helps a lot too. You need to really have a good view of the stitches when you're working off the knot stitches onto the little swags. And don't forget that little wiggle of the needle to help you get through them. And if you do ever pull the blue through, just take the needle out and work the stitch again. So that's the swag knot stitch. You can see how it looks here. I hope you'll enjoy working this stitch. If you try it, do let me know how it goes. And when you've finished, just turn the piece and switch yarns and continue to knit off all the stitches as normal, whether they're the slipped stitches or whether they're the knot stitches. And you'll see the little knots form nicely as you make each knit stitch.